Okay, everybody, we're back from lunch. Tummy's full. All attention, eyes forward on this panel of incredible writers up here. Okay, my name is Diana Hansen. Yes, yay!
Yeah, that's like a screen, please. Oh, okay.
They write the hardest books in the world, which are juvenile and YA. And I welcome you all today, and I hope we have a roaring, rousing panel. Can we start right here and go down the line, introduce yourselves, and tell the audience what the difference is between juvenile or middle grade and YA fiction, in your opinions?
Hi, I'm Alexa Donne. I write young adult thrillers. My current one that is nominated is The Bitter End, which is like, and then there were none, but with privileged teenagers who get murdered on a mountain. I mean, the big difference is, or like the challenge that you have to like navigate, is taking things that work in broadly in mystery, tropes, etc., and making them work for teenagers, which can be surprisingly difficult. Like, how do I get a group of disparate teens to a place without their parents so that I can kill them? Is always really fun. That's really it. How do I kill a bunch of teenagers? Because I do murder fiction, and just being aware. You can do a lot writing for young people, but you're still writing for young people. You have to be circumspect in terms of how far you push it, although that's really my editor's job, is to tell me you have 112 fucks in this book and you have to cut a lot of them. Do they have to be so mean? Yes, the answer is actually yes. And just kind of knowing your audience really, really well, because other people will tell you to pull back, and then you say, no, they're gonna bully each other relentlessly because I'm gonna murder them. So yeah, that's it for me. I do older teens too, which does make a difference.
Mystic Mountain.
Hi, I'm Janet Fox. Mystery Mystic Mountain is my 12th book, and I've written both YA and middle grade. And I think the difference between YA and middle grade doesn't matter whether you're writing a mystery or whether you're writing a fantasy or whether you're writing historical or contemporary. The difference is obviously the age of the reader, and juvenile or middle grade is 8 to 14 tops, and then 14 and up for YA. So you have to think in terms of what those different groups, those different buckets want. And middle grade readers are very much about family, forming friendships, group dynamics, not killer. So I don't write killer mysteries. I just think that every book has a mystery at its heart. So my books are all about mystery, but not necessarily that kind of really threatening mysteries, especially in the middle grade space. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Margaret Peterson Haddix, and my book that was nominated is The Stolen Key, which is the third book in a series called Mysteries of Trash and Treasure. And Janet just said everything that I was going to say. So I would say she did a really great job explaining all of that. But I would also say, having read Maureen's book and Alexa's book and Natalie's book, The Three YA People, there is lots and lots of murder. There's recovering from a rape situation. None of those things are things that we would put in middle grade. There are concerns that the kids might deal with that are very serious concerns, but it's not as bloody.
Hi, I'm Maureen Johnson. I'm here for Death at Morning House, which is my 16th book. I've written also the Truly Devious Stevie Bell mysteries and many other YA books. And so Death at Morning House is a dual timeline mystery. All of my mysteries seem to be where one history, a cold case happens well in the past, and it relates to a case in the present, both get solved. And this one is a case in the 1930s from a very wealthy family that lives on an island in the Thousand Islands, and what happened when two children died in the same day one summer in 1931, and in the present day when that house on that island is being reopened and there's some deaths in the present. And I think there's probably a wider gulf. I'm fully a YA towards adult writer. I would think there would be a wider gulf between middle grade and YA than there is YA and adult. Because I really believe there's very little difference between writing YA and adult fiction, aside from the age of the protagonist. You're not really seeing a lot of difference in terms of narrative complexity or even issues covered or anything like that. YA just tends to be a literature of firsts. So you're not going to get a detective who's like, here's me with my 16th wife, and I got to quit this job. Like, you're not going to get that. So if you're trying to create a detective, you're creating first cases. I have a detective now who's on her 4th case, and let me tell you, she is 18 years old. And she is starting to get that little bit of that patina of, oh boy, this shit again. But yes, YA kind of about first, but middle grade, I think there might be a bigger barrier. Not a barrier, a difference.
Hello, my name is Ginger Reno, and as you can, that's 2 words. And Find Her is my book that's nominated. It's a middle grade, and it is my debut novel, so I would feel a little bit more comfortable out there than up here. But in my mind, I think, well, of course, middle grade is younger. I'm inside, I'm an insecure 12-year-old, so that's kind of my sweet spot. I just think middle grades are a little softer. They can still deal with, hard issues. I mean, my book is about the missing and murdered indigenous epidemic, but you can't be as graphic. Some things have to be kind of done off page, and then the pacing. I think a lot of adult books, adult readers are more patient, and they kind of will allow a story to unfold. Kids, you gotta grab them. Young adult too. You gotta grab them, or it's on to the next thing. So.
That's great. Here, I'll lean.
Okay.
How is everyone? Are you actually awake? Are we here together? Are we doing it? We're doing it. I'm Natalie Richards. I am here for 49 Miles Alone, which was my 11th book, and it is a little bit hatchet set in the Utah backcountry, so in the desert, with a dose of single white female. Yeah, if you remember that. Somebody chuckled. I'm not the only old one. Yay! I think the difference I have found, because I also write middle grade and young adult, and I agree that young adult, that's really beautifully said. Like, it is a literature first, and in many ways middle grade is too. I find the biggest difference is my readers. My readers have made it very clear to me when they are done with middle grade and they are ready to move on. And it usually is perspective, what I think. I'm really trying to get into the head of a 17-year-old when I'm writing YA. That's really different than the head of an 11 or 12-year-old. So I think that if you think about your life in 6th grade versus your life in 10th grade, it's pretty radically different. And I think that's the real thing for me, is my perspective in these books is really different, and my readers decide when they're done. But I do have readers of all ages that go back to the middle grade just for fun, but you can definitely see the gravitation towards an older book. That's where I really see it.
What inspired you or motivated you or made you mad enough to write the books that you were nominated for here this week? Go ahead, start right here, and then we'll go down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The pressure of always going first. Honestly, really straightforward, this one. It was I adore and then there were none. Like, a closed circle mystery is one of my all-time favorite tropes, and I wanted to write one for YA. They definitely exist, but not in as big a number as I feel that they should. I think YA should publish a ton of them. And so I just decided to write one. And it was the challenge of, like, how, where, murder, whether, all that kind of stuff. And, like, making it work for YA, because the hardest part, honestly, at least for me, was it's wild to murder a bunch of people in an isolated location for something. So who would do that and why? And how do I make this work for 18-year-olds? What beef would work that would make sense and be high stakes enough so that it doesn't come across as, like, silly or too cheesy? But that was kind of the inspiration, the thought experiment of how do I write one of my just all-time favorite tropes and make it work, for YA.
So I started Mystery Mystic Mountain during COVID. So my goal was to write something fun. My previous book was about a pair of sisters who were homeless, so I didn't want to deal with a super issues book. Issues always creep into my books, but this one I just wanted to have fun. And one of my favorite books of all time is Holes, just because it's so layered, and it has that superficial layer of, it's a very fun read, crazy characters, but then there's something deeper underneath it, and so that was the inspiration for Mystery of Mystic Mountain, and it just stuck as, let's just have a good time, let's send them on a treasure hunt, let's send them into the mountains, kids on their own. The thread is not horrible, so I would say mine is a younger edge, middle grade, as opposed to one of the upper edge, edgier, like the book that I had written before. And so just getting through COVID and getting it done, that was the real inspiration.
Could you put up your name? Yeah, I can't see.
Yeah. There we go. So The Stolen Key is my 51st published book. And when I was starting out as a writer, I was definitely, the planner versus pantser thing. I was definitely that planner, because I was that, well, my professors in college said, this is how you do things. You outline, and then you write the book according to the outline. And the older I get, and the more I write, the less I'm like that, and the more I'm like, yeah, I'll figure it out as I go along. I've got a kind of a broad notion of where I'm going. So because this is the third book in the series, the two kids who are the main characters, Colin and Nevaeh, from the beginning, they both have a parent who works in junk removal. Nevaeh is one of 5 kids, has tons of relatives, knows exactly who she is. Colin has a mother who basically will not talk about his father. And every time he asks about the father, she says, he was just a bad person, we don't even need to discuss it. And I started the book kind of starting the first book in the series, kind of having a vague idea of what I thought the father had done that made the mother have that response. And it kind of shifted as I was writing the first book, and then it shifted even more as I was writing the second book. So my impetus for writing the third book was, I have to figure out what happened with the dad and why he's not in Colin's life. And so I start out the book that Colin gets a box on his porch that has a key in it, and there's a little label on it that says, your father wanted you to have this. And it was basically me trying to answer that question of why he wanted him to have that key and what the father's deal is.
So I had been writing a series detective with the Stevie Bell Truly Devious Mysteries, and I wanted to write a standalone. And because also standalone mysteries, I like both. I like the two kinds, the two flavors. And I wanted a all minor fair play, and they all have these historical back timelines of cold cases, and I don't quite know why I always did it that way. And I think there are 2 possible reasons. One is that I think history and mysteries are kind of the same thing ultimately, is that we're always looking back to figure out looking for the pieces of information that tell us how we got here at this particular point in history, whether it's a body on the floor or whatever's going on in the world. We have to look back through our bits of paper and whatever remains to try to figure out how we got to where we are. So for Death at Mourning House, the 1930s mystery is just a straight up mystery of 2 kids who die in a mansion on an island in the Thousand Islands, but it's also about the history of eugenics in America, which sounds heavier than I hope because I had to be careful because I'm like, ooh, that's a heavy subject, but it's part of our national fabric that we try to cut. It's not something we bring it back at various times. So that's the back end. And in the present day, we look at this house that's the remnant of that was built on that legacy. And there's also lots of just bodies dropping, et cetera, and things for you to figure out. But yeah, I think it's about how we got here, and also what institutions do we revere and why, and which ones do we simply need to burn to the ground.
Well, when everything shut down with COVID, it kind of made me slow down and think about what was important to me. And one of those things was learning more about my Cherokee heritage. And that's how I learned about the missing and murdered indigenous epidemic. And it was gut-wrenching. The murder rate for an Indigenous female is 10 times that of the national average, and it's the third leading cause of death. I mean, how does that not make your jaw drop? And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And then being that insecure 7th grader, 12-year-old, I thought, what if I was 12 years old and my mother went missing 5 years ago? So that's kind of how that all unfolded. And it's not just about her missing mother. It's about living with that, how she goes on living. And she stumbles upon another mystery. So it's actually 2 mysteries in one. You'll have to buy it to find out what the second one is. But it was very dear to my heart, and I was grateful that the citizens of the Cherokee Nation were very helpful in making sure that anything that I included in the book was accurate, so I could learn as I wrote. So anyway, it's a project very dear to my heart.
Maybe we should squeeze closer. I'll be really close to Ginger. So 49 Miles Alone is a book like 8 years in the making. So I write book after book, and I knew when my father died, I was very lost at sea. He was my best friend, my inspiration to be a writer. We were incredibly close. Losing him was like being dropped into the bottom of the ocean. I didn't know which way was up, and I couldn't fathom writing again. So I took a trip, really almost one of those, you put your finger on a map and, hey, there's a direct flight and I can afford it. So I went to Utah, and I went to southeastern Utah, and when I was in the desert, everything was so brutal and beautiful and awful and wonderful. And it really felt like the first thing I actually saw after my dad died. Like, it really connected with me. And I knew in that moment that I sat there, okay, I can feel again, I'm a human again, I'm gonna put a book here one day. But that's not what writing is. Like, you can have that spark, and then that spark has to simmer for a while until the right character comes along and the right story. So my grief took a big journey in Utah, and that was really the spark. But then, of course, Katie and Astor came along later, and that was the rest of the story.
Very, very interesting. Okay, all of us writers write, and we put in our red herrings and our twists and our turns. How do each of you handle your reveals? How do you make sure the twists come along at the right time, but don't come so early that give the book away, and don't stick your readers with, I know how this is going to end, and they close it, or they can't figure it out, and then they go back at the end, back thumbing through the first few pages, trying to find out where that clue came from. So what's the balance in twists, reveals, turns, that kind of thing?
That is such a complicated question. First, just in the kind of process-oriented direction, I plan my thrillers backwards. Like, I start with the end, which helps me a lot, knowing I have to know where I'm going. I know people who don't do that, and I don't know how. And I'm a plantser, so yeah, I don't plan everything, but I know where I'm going. And the hard part, what Natalie said, that sometimes you have a spark, but then you don't know how you're going to use it. So those will just sit in my brain, because the challenge is coming up with what I call a surface plot and all the other stuff, because it's all misdirection, because you have to hide what you're doing. So once I have something that is jazz hands enough that I'm like, okay, they're not going to be paying attention to this thing, then you write it, and then it all happens in editing for me. Obviously along the way, this would be really cool and twisty, or this would be a good red herring, and I write it, but I fix it in editing. I give the book to 8 different people at different stages. I have a bench of people who I'm always begging to read, fresh reads, which are very important, and I have them tell me what they're guessing, when and why, and then if it's too easy, I have to fix it. And it's just kind of figuring out where to breadcrumb things. I agree with Maureen, always fair play mystery. If something isn't a clue in Act 1, what are you doing? Someone should be able to go back and go, oh my God, it's so obvious now, and it's just going over the book 3 or 4 times with a fine-tooth comb and kind of pulling things out and putting things in. That's kind of the process. But also, that's a hard question.
Great answer.
It's a great answer to that hard question. Yeah, I am also a plantser, which means that I'm sometimes planning, and most of the time I'm winging it, which when you're writing a mystery and you have to put in those clues and you have to put in those red herrings, makes it really tricky. So in this novel, because I had a number of different clues, it has dual timelines and multiple points of view. So that's a lot of different sort of things to keep in mind. I actually had to make charts and graphs and timelines, physical timelines, which was very good because in the copy edit stage, the copy editor questioned one of my timelines. I'm not going to give something away. and I had to produce that timeline to show her, yeah, that was exactly how it works. But the timelines, graphs, and charts all came after my first draft. I wanted to give my first draft the emotional resonance, and so I always start with character, always, and develop the main character, very deeply before I can put very much on the paper. And then after that, I start trying to layer things in, and then I have to go back and fix all the things that I broke after I get through the first or second draft. So, yeah, that's a good question.
I am always very conscious of the short attention span of 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, the people who are reading my book. So if I am writing along and I'm getting a little bit bored with what I'm writing, and part of it is because I've planned it out ahead of time, my inclination is, well, I need to make something exciting happen right now. And so I tend to throw in something weird, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to explain that or how I'm going to make that fit with the rest of the book. So I feel like my biggest help with that is just revision. That, you can always go back and put that clue back in the first chapter that somebody's going to read past, but then it's going to make the thing that's in chapter 13 all make sense, and then it connects. And that it doesn't always work perfectly, and sometimes it's like the fifth revision rather than the first revision where I can figure it out. But that's kind of how I balance it. The other thing that I've become more and more aware of is, and I thought of this because I was doing a writing workshop with teenagers, and they were asking questions, and their questions made me feel like, oh, I'm really stupid about this. I should have figured this out years ago. But I'm trying to have a balance between things that happen to the character and things that the character makes happen. And particularly with kid and teen characters, kids, there are a lot of things they don't have control over in their lives. But honestly, there are a lot of things we don't have control over in our lives as adults either. So I'm always trying to balance that. This is, suddenly there's a storm and a tree falls on the kid's car. Like this just happened to you and it's going to drive much of the rest of the plot. Or is it something that the kid says, this is really important to me and I'm going to do this?
I also start from the end because, as far as I'm concerned, a mystery novel is always driving towards that. And if you don't know where you're driving towards, for me, it's hard to know where to steer steer the ship. But so I picture it kind of, in a line. But really, when I think about mystery stories, I think of them as this sort of ever winding spiral. At the center, you have an event, and the event takes place. There's a physical location and there's a time, and then as time kind of spirals out, you lose more information, and only little bits kind of fly off of that central event. A piece of paper, some crumbs on the floor, stuff that degenerates over time, or whatever the case may be. Like certain things will degenerate, footprints or etc., stuff in the snow, or a piece of paper that can last longer. So I kind of imagine this spiral of time that comes out and kind of reach into the central event and pull what I need. I need a shoe. I need a hair. What's that window doing? Did I map out? I'm an obsessive mapper-outer of maps. I draw maps, I draw plans, I draw room plans. All the books have maps and plans in them. I have to see concretely in space exactly where everything is happening. So yeah, I plan pretty carefully. And I actually feel like once I've done that, I feel more expansive. Maybe because, I know what I'm doing. Some of the decision fatigue is gone. And you can be very creative in a small space. Like, it doesn't matter the size of the space, your brain is infinitely expanding in that space. So if I'm like, I have to do a scene where here's what I've got going, okay, what can I work with that? So I'm with mysteries just because it's sort of a math problem. We're really giving people a problem kind of with a solution at the end. I'm very backwards towards the beginning focused.
What they've all said so far, but I'm a definite plotter. I know where it ends at the very beginning, I know what the title is, and then before I even really write, I am running that whole thing through my head constantly, and I mean, I don't plot so much that I know exactly what's going to happen, because I've accidentally killed off somebody that I really loved, but it also it allows me to go on that journey with my main character and say, well, I wonder if he had something to do with it, and it makes me feel what my main character feels, and then I have to come up with, the clue has to be a good enough clue, but it also has to make sense for a 12 or 13-year-old to be able to understand it, uncover it, and figure out if it's, you know, a false lead or not. But yeah, it's just an endless loop in my head mostly before I do hardly anything on paper.
Wow. I am totally amazed by that, because I might be the only person here who's not much of a planner. And I think the reason why I finally figured it out, I'm like, what is wrong with you? You create so many problems for yourself. And I do. But I think the problem is my books are very suspenseful. That is what my readers want. That's what I love to deliver. That's what I love to read. I want to be on the edge of my seat. I really wish I could have your map problem, because it sounds so good and it would make my life so much easier. I really want it. But I think for me, when I'm writing my first draft, I have two books. I have the book I'm sure I'm writing, and then I have the shadow book that's actually happening. So I'm writing and writing and writing, and then when I go back and read it, I'm like, oh, that's what I was actually writing. So I think I know. I do have my ending in mind. I do have like this spiral in mind. That's a really cool way to describe it. I really think that, and then it's always shifted a little. And I think that's part of my process that I embrace. So if you are not a natural plotter, it's okay. You probably are. It just comes out like I do. All the charts, all the maps, all the timelines, all the Excel in the world, it all comes out when I'm editing. But first, I have to figure out what the book is. And for me, that has to be a little messy so that it keeps me at the edge of my seat. So I think that's okay too.
In today's fast-paced world, the news cycle is constantly updating, and you rush home and turn on CNN to see what happened while you were in the bathroom. And so do you ever feel pressured to write faster or trickier or, you know, thriller-esque, more and more to snag what they often refer to as the short attention span reader because of the news cycle? Do you ever feel pressured to do that? And if so, how do you resist it? Or do you think it should be resisted?
Absolutely, I feel that pressure, and it's not even the news cycle, it's like TikTok. How do you get a current teenager to read your book instead of being on TikTok for 3 hours at a time, which is also a problem I have. And I mean, I love fast-paced commercial fiction. That's the good thing. So like the current book, The Bitter End, is that book. It is like frothy and fast and ridiculous. But I also love slower-paced, like moody mystery. And to get like granular with the industry, with YA specifically, like you kind of have to pick your battles and decide what's important to you. And every book, you know, like make a different decision with each book. Like sometimes you have to be brutally market-minded. Like I need a book deal. I need the house to support this. I need to sell a lot of copies. And it's like go, go, go. And I'll write one of those because I love those too. And sometimes like my last thriller was more like an edgy, cozy. And you write the book that like is beating in your heart. And though honestly, in that case, I knew that would be more crossover. More adults would find that book appealing, and that has definitely been the case. Fewer teenagers pick that up. I do book events, and they're like, they want the Ivies, and they want the bitter end. They don't really care about the edgy, cozy. So just know why you're writing a book, and do it for whatever reason resonates for you. But I guess I feel that pressure, and I very purposefully was like, sales are soft on this one, better go hard on the next one, but always also having fun. But I do feel that pressure. Teens are brutal. They will tell you when they don't like what you have written.
That is for sure. And also middle graders, they're really expecting that, mile a minute pacing. And so that's the one thing that I try to work on most, especially in revision. I'm cutting all that stuff that, as you said, puts you to sleep if you're reading it and it makes you your mind wander, or you think of picking up your phone. That's a bad sign. So yeah, all readers today, I think, really are looking for those faster paced reads. But I also, just me personally, I love literary deeply. I love words. I love wordsmithing. I love imagery and mood and tone and setting and all those descriptive passages that Tolkien-esque stuff, rich stuff. So I try to blend it. I think I try to blend it in each of my books. Some of my books are very, very fast-paced, just because of the age I'm trying to reach. I think that's exactly what you were saying, that really it's geared to the reader. And so if I know who my ultimate reader is, the book is going to be better for it. That's my first aim. So when I was writing mystery, very unlike my previous book, which was written for a much younger audience, that book is chapters that are 2 pages in length. This book is much more leisurely in the way I've presented the mystery. So I think it's all a matter of knowing the audience, especially when you're writing for young people.
I'm going to sound a little bit like I'm going to contradict what I said to the answer for the last question. In a way, yes, I'm very concerned that kids are watching TikTok videos and YouTube videos, and I don't know how much you all are paying attention to this particular trend, but kids are just addicted to devices, as we adults are. I mean, it's not that much difference, but their brains are still forming, and it's a little scary that they're not getting quite what we probably all had as children, that there's that time with a good book. So for me, in a lot of ways, I almost go to the opposite approach. I am not going to beat a TikTok video on pace. I am not going to beat a TikTok video on explosions per minute or that kind of thing with a book. That's just not going to happen. It's not possible. But I can have a character that the kids are going to care about. And I can make them, or you can make them weep over, well, I feel like this may be a spoiler, over missing pets. I mean, and a missing mother, definitely a missing mother, but like the missing pets, like so many kids have a pet that they care about, and they can identify with that so well, and that's what they care about starting out, and then you're also giving them that issue of the missing Indigenous women, which is very concerning. So more and more, I think my job as a writer for kids this age is to help them develop empathy. And yes, maybe I'm doing it with a mystery where I'm teasing them with red herrings and I'm teasing them with cliffhanger chapter endings that it's like, you have to read the next chapter because you have to know what's happening next. But what I'm really trying to do is to make them empathetic and to relate to the children in the stories who have problems, and hopefully to people in real life who have similar problems.
I don't know, man. I've had a lot of YA readers in front of me over the years, and I've certainly been to, I don't know how many 100 YA events and seen kids come up, and they have cartons of books. Like, they're wheeling up suitcases of books, 600-page books, and they got like a ton of them. They're wheeling around 6,000 pages of book. Like, they're just, kids who read really read. And I feel like you should write in the way that you write without consideration of that, maybe particularly trying to lean into speed for this reason, because we have an advantage in mystery. We have something people want. We have the answer. We have a thing that there's a problem at the beginning, and we're going to give you something at the end if you stay. But if you leave, you'll never find out. And I mean, you can look it up, but you won't really care. So we have an advantage. Like, there's a lot of fiction where you're like, all I'm going to get is a description of a wheat field for 900 pages, and I don't know if I'm supposed to care or not. And we have an advantage. So I feel like we have an advantage that we don't have to play into certain things. We can deliver in the way that we kind of want to deliver because we have that in our pocket. So I try to take that to my advantage. Because I think that we all have a problem with what's going on with our brains. Like, I think we're all in a fog right now. Things are too much, too fast. I mean, do you ever find out where you're like, I cannot remember where I am? I've heard 25 incredibly important things today. Am I holding a sandwich? Did I eat this sandwich? Did I make this sandwich? Whose sandwich is this? Like, you're just kind of overwhelmed. And so are kids, but they also have longer attention spans than I think sometimes we give them credit for, and that they actually want to go somewhere else and spend some time there. And I've seen the evidence of it. So I don't know. In many ways, I'm always going to say, if you're right the way you feel, that you do the job, because we all write our own books, and we all learn to write our books by writing that particular book. It's the thing. The course is the thing itself. You learn to write by writing, and you learn to write that book by writing that book. And so, I don't know. I don't know what kind of an answer that is, but that is sort of the best I've got.
Well, I don't feel, really the only pressure that I feel is to write a really good book. One of the things, even though I'm writing for a middle grade audience and a 12 and 13-year-old, I want it to be a good read for whatever age that picks it up. So one of the things that made me take this, really say, I want to do this, was years ago, I managed a retail store, and this mother and this probably 10, 12-year-old boy came in the store, and while she was shopping, he had a book in his hand. And he was so engrossed in this book, he was running into the racks, he was knocking things over, and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do that. So that's the only pressure I feel. That's my goal, is to write well.
I love that. That's beautiful. It's so much, right? Like, I'm tired. I'm real tired. But I think if I have pressure, the pressure is like, what's the point of any of it right now? So sometimes that's really hard to combat when you're like, here's the big white page blank in front of me, and I have to write a book, and somehow I have to find it in me no matter what's going on in the world. So I think the news hits me more that way, like, what's the point? And here's what I always find is the point, and it's very similar to you. Think about the book, the last one that you read that had you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And hypothetically, let's say you had a panel and had to get up in 2 hours for a flight from Columbus to be in New York at the Marriott Marquis, and you knew you would have dark circles under your eyes and be real tired for that panel, but you had to know how that book turned out. That is the best feeling in the world, and everybody loves that feeling. So anytime I'm like, what's the point? That's the point. Giving readers that feeling, that's the point for me. So when the motivation isn't there, that works. That helps.
Amen. Great. Now, quick 30 seconds, because we've got some time things here. What is the strangest rabbit hole of research you've all ever gone down? Make it quick. I know we get lost in rabbit holes, and does anything good ever come of it, or are you just blowing the morning? Start.
For this book, accidentally, I fell down a hole of high altitude mountaineering. I read over 20 books on it, and that's why there's a lot of altitude sickness, and I know a lot about satellite phones, which also ended up in the bitter end. It was a whole thing, yeah.
For mystery, it was discovering all of the hidden treasure stories that are out there that are real, and going into that rabbit hole of, Forrest Fenn, and which was actually found not far from where I live, and all those other hidden treasures that are out there, lost treasures that are out there, because that's what I wanted my kids to be playing with.
So my worst rabbit hole is feeling like I need to try out the things that I have in my story that I'm not sure if it's possible or not. So this was for a book quite some time ago. I had a girl who was escaping from a dangerous person, and she zipped herself into a very large suitcase. And I wasn't sure if that was possible. So I went downstairs in my house, got out the largest suitcase we owned from our basement, put it down on the basement floor, lay down in it, and then, very awkwardly, I'm pulling behind myself. And I got that zipper about 3/4 of the way around. And it occurred to me that I was home alone. My children, at the time, my children were young enough that they would be coming home from school, and they would come in, and I knew how they were, that they would be like, "Where's Mom? Oh, whatever, she's not here. Where's the snack?" And they would not come down to the basement and look for me. So I did not zip the zipper all the way around, but I did put that scene in the book because I'm sure it's possible.
That's so much better than my answer. In one of my books, someone was recreating the murders of Jack the Ripper. So when I was in England, my husband's English, so we spent a lot of time in England, and I just walked until I could walk every part of that map without assistance from my phone. I wouldn't stop. So until I felt like I knew exactly where to go and like what buildings used to be where, to the point where I was like, well, that building used to be there and that door used to be there, and or also finding out where all the sewers and rivers used to be. So walking through, I think it was Hyde Park somewhere, I was like, okay, listen to the ground right here. You see this drain? Yep, there's a river under there. A lot of sewer stuff. Now that I'm thinking about it, I forgot all the sewer stuff I did. A lot of stuff about London sewers. If you ever want to know, come see me after. I'll hook you up.
I didn't do a whole lot of research other than for the epidemic, but my main thing was the location research. It's set in Fort Gibson, Oklahoma, and which is a real place in the Cherokee Nation. So I wanted to make sure that, each street was, because I want Fort Gibson people to read it and be proud of it and recognize their hometown and say, oh, it's not, she couldn't get from there to there on a bicycle, it's just things like that. But as far as research is concerned, I like to make stuff up. It's easier.
Definitely easier. Mine, I'm a thriller writer, so people think, murder, decomposition, blah, blah, blah. True, I've researched all of that. But poop is really the thing I have researched more than you could fathom. Like, what does this poop look like? If they found it on a trail, how long is it pellets? Is it like this? I've seen pictures of poop. I've unbelievable amounts of knowledge on poop that no one should ever have, and you would not think a thriller writer would need, but there we are.
Wow, what can I say? I don't have any, I'm done. One quick question from the audience, and I think we're done, and that's something you can nab somebody to ask to.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I have to say, if you're not published, I am your story. Keep the faith. This is my debut novel. This last year, they bought Find Her on the first 10 pages. I hadn't even written it yet. And that never happens.
Yay.
Never. And
So
that was in April. It took me until October to not just be sitting in my chair thinking, this isn't real. This isn't really happening. I didn't even start writing it and I had to have it done by December. So this is just so surreal. So I just want everybody to keep the faith. It can happen for you. If it can happen for me, it can happen for you. I'm here. I can't believe it. I'm so deer in headlights. I actually walked into the men's room at the Met. And so I'm sorry if that was you. I promise I didn't see anything. But please keep the faith. It can happen. Your time's coming.
ladies and gentlemen, the best writers today.